Okay, so for this first one, we're going to solve by square roots, and you can only solve this way if there's only an x squared term and no x term. Okay, if there's an x squared term and an x term, you will not be able to solve this way. But in this case, I only have an x squared term. So what I can do is try to get that x squared term by itself. Okay, so first I'm going to subtract the constant that's going to be added to it. And so I have 4x squared is equal to 36. And then I have to get rid of that 4 because I got to get the term that's being squared by itself. And it's only the x that's being squared here. So I first have to divide by 4, and that's going to be x squared is equal to 9. And then I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Now, when something's being squared, the inverse operation of squaring something is taking the square root. But your answer is not just 3, because 3 squared is equal to 9, but there's another number that I could square to make it equal 9 as well, which is going to be -3. Okay, so what you're going to have to do anytime that in a problem that you're squaring something, you're always going to have to, in that next step after you take the square root, you're going to have to put a plus or minus. And the way we write it is like this, plus or minus 3. Okay, and for this one, notice the left side is a perfect square trinomial. Okay, so I'm actually going to title this perfect square trinomial. So because it's a perfect square trinomial, I can factor it into a binomial that's squared. Notice the ends are perfect squares, so what this is going to factor into is x plus 2 squared. You could do the t-chart, x times x, 2 and 2, 2x, 2x adds up to 4x. You can do the AC method, or you can just simplify it the easy way, because what multiplies be 2, or what multiplies be 4 that adds to be 2, x plus 2, x plus 2. And because they're the same, it's going to be x plus 2 squared. All it is factoring that perfect square trinomial, but it helps to notice that it is a perfect square trinomial. And now that I have this parentheses being squared, what I can do is take the square root of that, and that's going to get rid of the squared. So it's just going to be left with x plus 2. And because I took the square root, don't forget I got to put a plus or minus here. Okay? And then I'm subtracting 2. And it's not just plus or minus 3, and that's what a lot of people will do. Okay? You have to do -2 plus 5, but also -2 minus 5. Okay, it's -2 plus or minus 5. And those answers are going to be different. So this becomes +3, this becomes -7. So my solutions here are +3 or -7. Okay, so we're going to try to find the C here that makes this a perfect square trinomial. And the way we're going to do that is the formula is b over 2 squared. So I'm going to take my b. b is -6. -6 divided by 2 is equal to -3, and then -3 squared is equal to 9. So what that means is x squared minus 6x plus 9 will become a perfect square trinomial. you add the constant b over 2 squared. It's always going to be an addition though, because it doesn't matter if your b is positive or negative. When you square it, it's always going to become positive. So if I was looking to factor that, okay, here's the formula to find what the c is, but the factored form will always be x plus b over 2 squared. Now, here is where the sign will make the difference. This sign in the factored form is always going to be the same sign as the b. Okay, so in this case, when I factor this, x minus, my b over 2 was just negative 3, so that's why this is going to be x minus 3 squared. So in this one, we're going to solve the quadratic by completing the square. X squared plus 10x minus 3 is equal to 0. And I wrote the steps here. Okay? So the first thing I want to do, I want to get the left side in the form x squared plus bx. Now I just said left side. It doesn't matter which side that x squared plus bx is. Again, you still want to keep that x squared term a positive. So I'm first going to add the 3 because that's in my way of getting just the x squared and the x on one side. So I'm going to move that to the other side. So the way you want it is x squared plus bx equals your constant. Okay? And now I'm going to add b over 2 squared to both sides. Well, b over 2 squared is going to be 10 divided by 2 squared. 10 divided by 2 is 5. 5 squared is equal to 25. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 25 to both sides. And I'm left with x squared plus 10x plus 25 is equal to 28. Okay, and now I'm going to factor this and then solve it. So when I factor it, it's going to be x. Now it's going to be a plus because this is a plus. And really you're just taking the square root of this last term. So it's x plus 5 squared is equal to 28. And now I can solve it. The only thing I have on the left side is that parentheses that's squared. So what I can do is take the square root of both sides. I'm going to come up here. And I have x plus 5 is equal to, remember the plus or minus square root of 28. And then subtract 5. So I'm going to get x equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 28. And we need to simplify the 28. I'm going to use the birthday cake. Factor out a 2. 2 times 14 is 28. 2 times 7. 7 times 1, and that's my candle. So I have a pair of 2's. That means a 2 comes out. So it's going to be x equals negative 5 plus or minus still 2 times the square root of what doesn't have a pair is the 7. In this case, the quadratic term doesn't have a coefficient of 1. It's 3. I'm still going to start it the same way. And I'm going to subtract 6 to get it into the x squared plus bx form. But what I'm going to do here is divide by that coefficient in order to get that x squared term to be a 1. So it's x squared minus 4x is equal to negative 2. Okay. Now I can complete the square by adding b over 2 squared. B over 2 squared in this case is going to be negative 4 over 2, which is negative 2. Negative 2 squared is 4. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So this is going to be x squared minus 4x plus 4 is equal to 2. And I can factor this now. It's going to be x, again, because this is a minus, that's going to be minus here. The square root of 4 is 2, so x minus 2 squared. And then I can take the square root. X minus 2 is equal to, don't forget the plus or minus, and add 2 to both sides, and I get x equals 2 plus or minus square root of 2. That square root of 2 can't be simplified. Alright, so here's 2 for you to try. And then come into class and we'll go over it and maybe go over a little bit more in depth on some of these in explanation. Here's a joke. How do you make an egg roll? You push it.